I asked my viewers to propose new balance changes to items they considered to be underpowered in Risk of Rain 2. Let's see if their ideas belong in a museum or the shredder. Before we get into it, I'm trying something new here with the faster pace of the video, so please give me your feedback on that in the comments. Nuka-Hana's opinion is an item I personally think is pretty underrated, especially late game when you have a bunch of access healing at your disposal. I understand that it's still pretty situational and replaceable by most items, and right now, especially in Eclipse, it's tough to proc at all. Shaw from the Discord suggests that instead of the stored healing being percentage based, it should be a flat value. This would allow it to proc far more often and predictably with enough healing, and you wouldn't be limited by having such a large health bar. They also suggest a damage buff to 1000% with fire damage on top of it all. This part might need to go to the shredder, as I believe that you should either buff the damage or buff the healing storage, and buffing both of them might push it to be far too strong. They also recommend an alternative option being to make it guaranteed on Wetland Aspect, which is where you unlock it in the first place. I really like this idea, and it would reward you especially if there were like some sort of mini-boss you had to fight to get it. It would reward the more patient players and help snowball those who already have a good start. So here's the change. Nuka-Hana's opinion now stores 100% of healing as soul energy. After the soul energy reaches a baseline of 100 HP healed, fire a skull that deals 500% plus 500% per stack base damage. This change makes it so that the skull damage is no longer tied to the amount of health healed, and instead the stored healing is just a requirement to fire the skull in the first place. I felt 500% base damage was enough, as any higher and it may be far too strong with how fast the healing will be fired with the lower health pool. The Leeching Seed is an item that I think everyone knows sucks more than most. 1 HP of healing per shot is extremely hit or miss depending on the survivor you're playing, as attack speed can make a huge difference in its effectiveness. King Chicken proposes what I think it always should have been, in that it should heal 1% of your maximum health instead. This way, you still need to hit 100 shots to heal to full, but it isn't nearly as laborious as the current version. He also proposes an added feature where it gains a chance to heal you for 20% on hit, and the further stacks increase this chance. I love this change, as it straight up just makes this item worth taking at all. The Leeching Seed now would look like this. Heal for 1% of your maximum health on hit. Gain a 10% plus 10% per stack chance to heal for 15% of your maximum health instead. I lowered the healing by 5%, as 20% is a bit crazy for having a maximum stack count of like 13 for all proc chances. I think this works out well, and it will be a good and rewarding way to heal yourself, especially in Eclipse. The Defense Nucleus is kind of forgettable as a boss item. It only activates on elite kill, and the alpha constructs it makes miss half the time anyways. What Worldline recommends is to cut out the alpha constructs entirely, and instead give you a chance to fire an alpha construct shot that deals a low amount of damage. While I want to like this concept, I don't really love the idea of completely losing the summoning of the alpha constructs entirely. I think I'm going to have to turn this one to the shredder, as while the defense nucleus may not be great, it's still an endearing item. My proposed change is to simply make it so that the alpha constructs are generally buffed. Doubling the attack speed and increasing their damage by around 50% sounds fine, as that should allow them to efficiently help during a boss fight or something. It may not be that much stronger, but I honestly don't mind. I still find the summoning of the alpha constructs to be important as an aesthetic item, which has its place over just more straight up damage. This is a cool item that adds to the feel of the game, and removing that in exchange for an unnoticeable effect with mediocre damage seems silly to me. This one's gonna be a no for me. Most of the item proposals were just small stat buffs or obvious changes that I'm sure we've all thought of, so let's do a quick lightning round of those. The War Banner is limiting, especially in the late game where its buff no longer matters that much and only appears during the teleporter fight. It really just doesn't come in handy all that often. Going off of what Worldline says here again, we'll be making it grant a non-stacking 20% damage buff while inside of it to you and all of your allies. I think this would be fine, as exponential damage stacking existing would already make this flat 20% incredibly helpful. The Bison Stake is obviously underpowered, and because of this, I think it also has an obvious solution. We'll be making it a simple 5% stacking maximum health increase, as any larger and the pearl would be obsolete. It still wouldn't be great, but it wouldn't be glorified white scrap. I don't know if I agree with it, but changing the PSG to be a health gate on top of just a shield seemed to be a popular idea. A health gate, for those who don't know, completely stops an attack's damage that would have broken through it. This change effectively allows you to have 2 health bars and a huge second chance. Because of this, I'm not a huge fan, as it would be really busted. Shield already counters a lot of the Eclipse levels, and this would be overkill in my opinion. The Hunter's Harpoon is very weird to work around, since at low stacks the movement speed burst is just that, decaying too fast to be really that useful at all. The common proposed change was to make it a lesser movement speed buff that would take longer to decay at base level. A simple but likely effective change. Infusion may be a nice item, but the limit of 100 HP is a bit pathetic at times. The fact that you have to work for it is really complicated and can sometimes feel out of reach. The simple solution is to remove this limit and make it stack infinitely. Maybe make it break like the Delicate Watch does at low health or something to balance this, but I like this change regardless. And finally, a surprising change a lot of people wanted to see was a rework to the Death Mark, which I can accept. The proposed change was to give it an execution barrier as well as the 50% damage buff, because apparently that's not enough for the amount of work you have to put in to activate it in the first place. I'll allow this, I suppose, but I feel like the damage nerf this person recommends to balance it isn't enough. I think it should be brought all the way down to 30%. The next item on the list was an item I'm sure everyone expected to appear on this list. The Happiest Mask often creates more enemies and obstacles for you than actual allies. If you create a Clay Dunestrider ghost, it can literally kill you with its health leeching attack. What Silent Foxtrot proposes is for the chance to turn into a ghost to be higher, and instead of doing their own thing, they would target the enemies you attack yourself. I like this change a lot, as it turns the Happiest Mask into an active item it honestly deserves to be. It's such a cool concept of an item, and it's such a huge shame that it didn't end up being that good in the first place. The new version of the Happiest Mask is gain a 30% chance on kill to turn an enemy into a ghost for 10 seconds. Ghost allies gain 200% plus 200% per stack damage in target enemies that you attack with your primary ability. I think the damage nerf here from the 1500% of the original item is needed, as the chance increase is much larger, and the damage will be much more consistent, reliable, and effective with the new targeting system. This one probably has the largest change of all the reworks, so be sure to let me know how you feel about it in the comments below. The Supermassive Leech just sucks. There isn't much to say about it more than that. It heals way too little and has a way too long of a cooldown. It's almost useless on Eclipse, and honestly Monsoon too. Shaw again recommends that we turn it into a pseudo on-kill item, where on activation the leech attaches to an enemy and builds up the longer you shoot the enemy for, exploding in an AoE heal on kill. The new item looks like this. Upon activation, attach a leech to an enemy. Upon killing that enemy, a 10-meter radius healing explosion is released that heals you for HP equal to the amount of damage you dealt to the enemy. I think this not only fixes the leech's quality issue, but it also just makes it more dynamic and less boring than the current version is. The Harvester's Scythe, Leeching Seed, and Supermassive Leech all kind of do the same thing, in different ways, so changing this equipment like this is really interesting and cool to me. The Singularity Band is everybody's favorite item to hate, and for good reason. In exchange for 2 of the strongest green items in the game, you get a mediocre effect with pathetic damage. The Tentabubble already fulfills the niche of holding enemies still, so the Singularity Band ends up being a bit redundant. The usual fix I saw people saying for this one is to simply buff its stats up, so it's more like a legendary item, as it consumes 2 greens. The final solution from Riley is just that, plus 250% total damage instead of 100, half the cooldown, and a stacking radius that might make it actually as oppressive as it always should have been. The stacking radius may be a bit much, as 250% total damage can get out of hand very quickly, but I honestly wouldn't mind it. Consuming Runald's and Kajaro's band is a heavy price, so I feel like it's fine if the resulting item is a bit busted because of this. The Red Whip struggles from being a rather picky item. Especially in the later levels, it's hard to stay out of combat, as shooting at enemy removes the speed boost, boost, and you kind of need to do that. A simple fix proposed by Bandit is to make it more whip-like. Instead of it being just a passive boost that helps you after the TP fight ends, they suggest making it so that it is a small permanent speed boost after you take damage. I like this a lot, but I feel like it could get out of hand quickly. They suggest a 0.1% speed increase each time, but you could still metagame this, like the roll of pennies, I think. Similar to Infusion, each stack could have a limit of like 50% maximum speed boost or something, so it wouldn't get too out of hand too quickly. The Benthic Bloom is a silly item, but a detrimental one. White items are insanely strong, and removing all of them in place for worse green or red items can be run-ending depending on what you lose. Have 10 Lensmaker's glasses that are carrying your Huntress run? Too bad, they're all chronobaubles now. Have 15 HEGs that are shredding the enemies? That's tough. They're all Aegises. Stories like these happen all the time, and one of the suggested changes I saw from Snowdust was to simply limit how many stacks of an item it can upgrade. It would still be an overall detriment to your run, but I think I'd still like it if it were to stay as that gimmick. The proposed limit was 5 stacks, but I honestly would be totally fine if it were only 1 stack of 1 item per Benthic Bloom. This would allow you to get legendaries and greens without losing all of your stacks of white items that you so desperately need. And that's going to be all for today. There were a lot more proposals, but a lot of them were duplicates or simple stat changes, or ones that I straight up didn't agree with, so I didn't really feel like they were interesting enough to talk about. Plus, I wanted to keep this video relatively short, which I think I've achieved. Be sure to let me know how you feel about these quote-unquote patch notes in the comments, and feel free to propose your own as well. I think it's really cool to do theorizing like this, and would like to see what you guys come up with. If you enjoyed the video and would like to see more, consider subscribing, as it helps me out a bunch, and if this video does well, I'll consider doing a second installment at a future time. Other than that though, thank you for watching. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel like they do, and yeah, that's all for me. Actually, there's one more change that I couldn't resist including. The stun grenade doesn't make its effect obvious enough, and it can sometimes feel like it doesn't do anything. Emily proposes a obvious solution that I'm disappointed in myself for not thinking of first. That is, to make it into a real flashbang! Woo!